Somewhere in the South Pacific, there is a continent, almost the size of Australia. It has mountains, ancient granite, ridges, valleys, and a coastline shaped over millions of years. And you have almost certainly never seen it, because 94% of it is completely underwater. Scientists didn't just find a new island, they found an entire hidden continent. You probably learned there are 7 continents. That's what most maps still show today. But in 2017, an international team of geologists made it official. There is an 8th. It's called Zealandia. Nearly 5 million square kilometers of continental crust, about 2/3 the size of Australia, and almost all of it sits underwater, hidden beneath the Southwest Pacific. Here's the part that sounds almost impossible. How do you discover a whole continent in the 21st century when we've already mapped the entire planet? The truth is, nobody stumbled onto Zealandia in a single moment. There was no dramatic reveal. Instead, scientists spent decades gathering data, sonar readings, rock samples dredged from the seafloor, satellite gravity measurements, slowly building a picture that had been sitting right there in plain sight the whole time.
By 2017, the evidence was undeniable enough that a team led by geologist Nick Mortimer formally declared Zealandia a continent, ending a debate that had quietly simmered for over 20 years. This wasn't just a naming exercise. Geologists have strict rules for what counts as a continent, and Zealandia had to check every box. It needed to rise clearly above the surrounding ocean floor, and it does, standing 1 to 2 kilometers higher than the seabed around it.
It needed a distinct mix of rock types. Granite, limestone, sandstone. The same kind of rock you'd find on any other continent, not the basalt that makes up a normal ocean floor. It needed thicker crust than the ocean around it, up to 30 kilometers thick in places, compared to roughly 7 kilometers for standard oceanic crust. And it needed to be one coherent, well-defined mass, rather than a scattering of tiny islands. Zealandia passed every single test. So if Zealandia is a real continent, why can't you see it? Around 80 million years ago, Zealandia was part of the ancient supercontinent Gondwana, attached to what is now Australia and Antarctica. As Gondwana broke apart, Zealandia was stretched, almost like dough pulled thin, until its crust became far thinner than that of a typical continent. Thinner crust sits lower, and over millions of years, that thinned-out landmass gradually sank beneath the waves, until only its highest points remained above the surface. Those remaining high points are the only parts of Zealandia we actually recognize today. Here's something that might change how you look at a map forever. New Zealand isn't really an island nation floating alone in the Pacific. It's the largest visible fragment of an entire sunken continent, along with New Caledonia, Lord Howe Island, and a scattering of smaller islands. Even Aoraki, Mount Cook, New Zealand's tallest peak at over 3,700 meters, is really just the highest point of Zealandia poking out above the ocean. Everything you've ever seen of New Zealand on a map is roughly 6% of the whole story. The other 94% has been hiding beneath the waves this entire time. This isn't just a geography trivia fact. Recognizing Zealandia as a real continent changes how scientists study the entire planet. Recent surveys have mapped Zealandia's ancient granite backbone in detail for the first time, along with a giant volcanic region roughly the size of New Zealand itself, created by massive eruptions between 160 million years ago as Gondwana was tearing apart. Because Zealandia stretched and thinned instead of shattering into fragments, it gives scientists a rare, mostly intact example of how continents behave when they're pulled apart, something that's much harder to study on continents that broke into pieces. Understanding Zealandia helps researchers understand rifting, continental breakup, and the deep history of plate tectonics everywhere on Earth, not just in the South Pacific. Here's the part most people don't realize. Zealandia wasn't fully mapped in 2017. It's taken years longer to finish the job. The southern 2/3 was surveyed in 2019. The northern third wasn't completely mapped until 2023, using ship-based sonar, magnetic field data, and uncrewed survey vehicles to finally chart the last unmapped stretch of its underwater terrain. That makes Zealandia the very first continent on Earth to have its geology mapped completely, edge to edge, something that still hasn't been fully done for the 7 continents you already know. We finished mapping our newest continent before we finished mapping some of the old ones. So the next time you look at a world map, remember this: it's already missing missing something enormous. Somewhere beneath a stretch of the South Pacific that looks like open ocean on every atlas you've ever seen, there is a continent with its own mountains, valleys, and volcanic history. One that was never actually lost. It was always exactly where it is now. We just didn't have the tools to see it clearly until recently. If an entire continent could stay functionally invisible until 2017, it raises an uncomfortable question. What else is sitting in plain sight, waiting for someone to finally connect the data? If you liked finding out about the hidden ocean inside our planet in the last video, this is the same idea turned outward instead of inward. Earth hiding enormous things in plain sight, both above and below. Let me know in the comments, if you could explore one hidden place on Earth, above or below the surface, where would you go? Subscribe if you want more of what's hiding beneath the surface of the world you thought you already knew. I'll see you in the next one.